A number of experiences that basically caused me to learn a lot about like myself and who I am as a Black man specifically. And those experiences informed me of necessity, or should I say a passion towards like fighting for justice and really ensuring that our country lived up to the values that it often espoused, specifically when it came down to ensuring that each and every person was given the proper respect that they were due. So I have to say that if I really were to think about it, the moment where I really like developed this activism or this passion was when Trump was elected in 2016. I was in junior year of my college career. I'd assumed that things were going to be positive. It was actually my very first experience with politics altogether. I worked on a campaign for about 5 to 4 months. And when I saw that he got elected, I was disturbed. So I just thought to myself, this guy does not represent any of the values that I remember growing up, and in general, the values that I want to fight for. So I figured that I would start to take more of an active role in politics, and specifically advocating for those people who don't necessarily have voices in our society.
Okay. All right. Tell me a little bit about your background. Where, you said you was from Ann Arbor. Where did you go to school? Different things of that nature.
So I started out going to Ba Elementary School, went to Slauson, and then from there, Skyline High School, and then went to Michigan State University. So basically, I grew up, my first part of my life was basically focused in Ann Arbor. But
okay,
towards like the next 11 years, I was raised in Ypsilanti, technically, Pittsfield, in that area. So I kind of utilized that as an opportunity to learn as much as I possibly could about both communities, and to embrace the fact that I have family in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. Kind of just really wanted to kind of learn more about how exactly I would play my role in my family, but it only got serious when I considered like the political aspects of things.
Okay. What makes you feel inspired? What inspires you?
I have to say, what inspires me most nowadays is the fact that there is so much energy out here when it comes down to fighting for a new, and should I say, truthful democracy when it comes down to this country, when we consider the fact that we have a history of various episodes of oppression, and the fact that we have a society that doesn't necessarily live up to the principles that it espouses. So for instance, when I worked at the Washington County Public Defender's Office as an intern, I didn't necessarily know much about the criminal justice system. So when I went through that experience, I saw a number of things that made me very passionate about criminal justice reform, and the fact that a lot of people that look like me and you are put through the system and placed on very unfair terms. And I just thought to myself, this is a system that needs to be reformed and changed. And that's what led me to actually work on Eli Savitt's campaign. I initially had looked around on all the other prosecutor candidates, but I felt like Eli's platforms and his positions really spoke to me. So that began my tenure as Eli Savitt's deputy campaign manager. And from there on, I really thought to myself, if we can abolish systemic wrongs like cash bail, the fact that indigent defendants are not given the same rights as other people who go through the criminal justice system, if I could at least do that aspect of changes and then from there on try to figure out other ways in which I can make this country a better place, I'd be more than happy to. And specifically when I consider the fact that there are a lot of people hurting, frankly, throughout all of this community in Washington. And I wanted to do whatever I could to elevate their voices instead of speak for them. So that was the main thing that really drove me to be inspired. And just in general, the lovely community we have here, the diverse community, and the fact that we have a lot of people who are trying to fight the good fight. That's what gives me energy every day, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this area, man. Like you spoke about the diversity. There's definitely, it's very diverse. Somebody said my warrior brother. But this area, I noticed that when I moved here, it was very diverse, multi, black, white. That's what made me fall in love with it. You know what I mean? As far as that's concerned. So do you consider yourself an activist?
I would say yes. And to a certain extent, when it comes down to advocating people's messages, specifically those who don't necessarily have the ability, or just like in general, people disregard them based off the way they look and the way they talk, at least in some shape or form, I can try to elevate their voices. But more than anything else, what I want to do is do whatever I can to get people to a point where they actually can speak to those in power. And me, myself, I would just say that my main goal is to be what you call someone that's really dedicated to public service. And I plan to go to law school for that very purpose in the next year, to develop those skills so I can actually work towards ensuring that people get a chance, specifically those people who might be less fortunate within like the community that I live in, a chance to really like succeed and be a trailblazer to a certain extent. But more than anything else, I want to make changes so that everybody can have a fair shot in this society when it comes down to achieving whatever aspirations or dreams that they desire. So that's the way I can answer that question, I think.
Yeah, you did good. You did great. If me coming as if I was younger than you, I'll put it that way, and I go, Mr. Dance, what's the best tip that you can give me to make this world a better place? With your experience that you have thus far, what's the best thing you can give as far as an advice to someone that's younger than you, that's looking up to you?
So basically, I would say try to challenge your comfort zone as much as you possibly can and realize that you have power. There will be a lot of people in your life that will tell you that you're powerless and try to dissuade you from actually having aspirations and dreams about what you believe the world should be or what you think should be changed about the current life that you live or the current city that you live in. Don't listen to that, because what it really comes down to is whether or not you have the imagination, the will, and the courage to make your dream become reality. And that's why I believe any young person, specifically when it comes down to politics or any kind of profession, really needs to understand, because really it's just like I see myself torchbearer for them, and I want them to take up the charge after I'm old and gone, because that's what drives me to realize that there are going to be people after me and many other people that are like me working towards a better tomorrow. And I just hope that they take up the heat after me. So that's all I can say.
Seeing the climate dealing with the coronavirus, dealing with the racism, dealing with hate, dealing with all the things that kind of make a conglomerate of feelings for people, negative feelings for most, different things of that nature. And I look at you as a young Black African American that's making positive moves towards change, right? I personally admire that about you because when I was your age, I wasn't even thinking nowhere near politics or anything close to it, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. It's just like, I'll be honest with you. I try to learn every day. Like, it's not anything perfect. To tell you the truth, some days I have to check out from all this stuff because it is so like, it is all encompassing. You feel yourself almost losing sense of what is like, you lose a sense of self-care almost when it comes down to getting involved in these kind of issues. But I just think to myself, it is essential for us to really keep pushing. And unfortunately, due to the passing of RBG yesterday,
Yeah.
it gets a little harder now. But the thing is, the one thing we have to realize more than anything else is that hope is a discipline, not some thing that you occasionally get. It is a responsibility for all of us to realize that the fight's not over yet. And to realize that we can't necessarily resort to violence, but we have to maintain the course towards dreaming of that better tomorrow, that world where everybody has a fair shake in this country, and really making sure that this country lives up to the multiracial democracy that we all know it to be. One thing that I really would say more than anything else is that racism more or less has been a cancer in this country alongside the epidemic that we have now. Like, racism has been a global pandemic ever since conception of this civilization that we have now. And now we have another pandemic that actually highlights the issues that we face with race. So now it's time for us to realize, or just know, that when the chips are down, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to try to push towards when it comes down to making this country a better place? And seeing the fact that there are resource disparities within certain communities, understanding that there are communities that exist in this country where people are purposely denied access to healthy food, the fact that people are not able to pay enough money so that their schools can be of quality. And this is all systemically driven to the point where people are not able to get the same resources that other communities are given. So that's the thing that we have to do. We have to realize that these wrongs exist and try to do everything we can to build towards a better tomorrow. I hate to say the phrase over and over again, but I think that ultimately what it boils down to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say, let's say if I was a Caucasian male,
Mm-hmm.
don't understand why it's the Black Lives Matter. Why is it a big fuss? Because as a Caucasian male that may have been privileged, maybe I really truly don't understand, right? I think a lot of times when I talk to some of my Caucasian brothers, they honestly really don't understand. And it's not that they're racist. It's not that they really truly, and you can see it, that they really don't get it. What would you say to that? And you can expound on it if you like.
I would say that the fact that they themselves don't really understand the current situation we live under is a byproduct of the fact that there has been a purposeful effort to not necessarily portray those experiences or the information, or should I say the history, accurately that our community has faced.
Hmm.
And really, it's just a matter of not necessarily condemning a person, but realizing that there is humanity behind the fact that that person genuinely doesn't know, like you said, and that that individual, I mean, as hateful as they might be, or not even hateful, but just frightened as they might be, it's something that stems from the fact that they themselves don't necessarily have the experience, or they themselves have been like deprived of the same experiences that you have. So it's not necessarily our responsibility to educate them, but to realize that we are walking with them towards a better future that they can be included in. Because the one thing that we have to realize in this fight for racial justice, or should I say racial equity, is that we're all in this together. This battle that we're waging for a better country ultimately boils down to everybody succeeding. And this is something that's good for America, not just for the Black community. And really what's happening now, and I'll admit to you this, I've had conversations with a couple of my friends that are white as well, and they basically, there's just something that tugs at them, that fact that you have someone like George Floyd that has a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That conscience, that fact that this particular event where this man was not armed, he was pinned down for all sake. Basically, that is an example of what is wrong with this country when it comes down to race. And I think to myself that those moments are opportunities for us to cross over and show to them that this is a problem that exists, and these are fears that you don't necessarily have to experience. But we're not trying to say that we're better, or in any shape or form there is in some sense something wrong with them. It's just a matter of us really collectively being open and able to have conversations about tough topics. And this will more or less make our country a better place in comparison to it being somewhere where we consistently and constantly deny what's happened in the past.
Me being, 44, I've seen a lot, you know what I mean? And, growing up in Detroit, and seeing a lot as well as far as police brutality, because that's one of the things that police reform is something that I'm big about.
Right.
I really do believe 100% in police reform, and I 100% believe, and we have to hold the police unions accountable for safeguarding the bad apples, if you will, for safeguarding them. That needs to stop. As far as police reform is concerned, how do you feel on that, Mr. Dance?
I totally agree with the idea of police reform. In fact, I would say that we need to rethink our criminal justice system altogether when it comes down to how we treat people of color and how we perceive incidents of police bias. And one of the things I really believe needs to happen is that we need to do something with, or just more or less abolish qualified immunity, because that allows a lot of police officers who have done great harm to a community, for instance, to walk away and just basically go along with the community to a certain extent. I believe that not all police officers are bad. It's just a matter of us realizing that we need to hold those police officers who are bad to account, and do whatever we can to try and give police officers the resources they need. So, for instance, educating them as social workers alongside being police officers, and trying to figure out ways in which we can encourage law enforcement to be more of an ally to the community instead of someone that's perceived as an invader from those who live inside it. And one thing that this all really stems down to is the fact that there is a continuous feeling that a lot of people of color feel within certain communities, specifically the community I come from, they feel as if they're not trustworthy, and that is something that a lot of those people who are in authority have to work towards changing. And really, when you think about it on the macro scale, you have all these Supreme Court cases that have passed in our history that have actually protected police officers to like racially profile individuals, for instance. And you have all white juries that are accepted via this colorblind language that is utilized by our court system. So, for instance, Michelle Alexander, who wrote The New Jim Crow, talks about this very often in her book about how we have a system that doesn't necessarily treat people equally. In fact, there are disproportionate responses based off of people's color. So that's something that really, that's what drives my opinion about police reform, and the fact that we also need to do whatever we can to invest in communities so that we can figure out ways to have resources allocated to people so that they don't necessarily have to rely on law enforcement. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And then just like hit the problem on the head and just make sure that we like just disrupt the school to prison pipeline that we often see in our communities. And that's something I really believe needs to happen more than anything else.
Yeah, 8 Mile that runs through Detroit, it separates Detroit from Southfield, the suburbs, if you will. And back when I had first got my car, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I got to make sure everything is right before I go across 8 Mile. So once I got everything correct, because Northland Mall was over there, and I wanted to go to the mall. So once I had everything correct, license was correct, I crossed over. But only to find that it didn't matter, that I was still getting pulled over for no reason. It was little things like this car fit the description. We was getting calls of robberies, and you fit the description. And like I can tell you a story. I was in Royal Oak. I was living in Royal Oak at the time, and we used to walk to work. And I cannot tell you, I got arrested twice. The first time I got arrested, the guy said, well, you fit the description of somebody who did something. So we just want to make sure, but don't walk up the residential streets. Make sure you stay on Main Street. And I'm thinking, man, how you gonna tell me where I can walk? So that affected me. So little things like that stacks, right? It stacks to a point that you begin to realize, like, man, the color of my skin really is a threat to some people, or just the color, period. Right. And for them, and I remember kept asking why, like, wait, I didn't even do nothing. Oh, I just told you can't go down the residential street. And as a Black man, we go through this time and time and time again. So it's not about don't put yourself in that situation. This is what I'm getting to, because you hear a lot of people say, well, don't put yourself in that situation, and it never happened. And that's so far from being true, because I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just walking to work.
Often the situation comes to you.
Exactly. So yeah, it wasn't that I was doing anything, but the reason I said that story, what would you say to that? Because, that's one of the arguments is, well, just stay out of the police way. Just don't do wrong and nothing to happen to you.
Well, more than anything else, I would say that, like I said, the situation comes to you. And so often there are a number of stereotypes that have been building over the last, actually 400 years, to be honest. It comes down to Black males and people of color in general, where you perceive people who happen to look different from you, specifically Black males, as being threats. And to tell you the truth, that is something that goes back to the same problem I talked about previously, the fact that there's been a misinterpretation within our current system that doesn't necessarily show that these wrongs exist. And the fact that, yeah, you might perceive a person of color as being in some shape or form rightfully locked up, but really you don't understand the fact that I have to be afraid, or I have to cartel my way of living different from you, and you can walk down like a certain path and a police officer doesn't bother you whatsoever. There's a problem with that. And that's something that really a lot of people have to come to terms with, and that involves us being brave enough to, now, I mean, it's not really, again, our responsibility, but it's really a matter of engaging people and talking to them about these problems and having tough conversations. The one thing that we've noticed about the United States is that there has been a historic effort to avoid these types of discussions, specifically in regards to race, because it involves a lot of uncomfortable truths being aired out. And this country is frankly in the process now of really talking about these kind of things. And you even now see in the Senate, specifically in the United States, efforts by Senator Tom Cotton, who actually like pushed for effort to strike out any education system or basically cut off funding for any local education system that actually like looks into the 1619 project. And that is a groundbreaking, or should I say pioneering effort in terms of journalists cataloging the experience that African Americans had throughout this country and the various eras of oppression that we've experienced. And that's something that is a reoccurring and persistent problem in this country when it comes down to race. And it's really just a matter of us figuring out ways to work our way out of it, honestly.
It's a show called What Will You Do?
Right.
Have you ever saw that show?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, like, I used to grow up on that, honestly, man. Just like seeing the scenarios and stuff.
Yeah, great topic, man. They be having some great topics. But one of the ones that stuck out to me, they had a scenario that it was a woman that was they was acting like they was getting into an argument and the guy was kind of roughing her up. And they had a Caucasian couple doing it. And people was running over there, hey man, what you doing? You don't treat a lady like this, and so forth and so forth. They put a black male and a black woman together. Nobody said anything. And so when he went and asked why you didn't say anything, and the first thing they said was angry black male, right? That's the social conscience that a lot, not all, but a lot of Caucasians look and say, oh, he's just going to act a nut. I'm not going to get involved because he's an angry black male. And so they keep painting the picture of black males being angry, black males being aggressive, black males being violent, right? When that happens in Asians, it happens in African Americans. I don't care what race or where you from. You got bad, you got good.
Right.
But when it comes to that term, angry black male, what can you expound on as far as that's concerned?
Well, I would have to say that when you consider the stereotype of the angry black male, it really is a construct that was created out of just like what you watch on television. And for instance, media throughout most of American history, the construct of seeing black people as being in some shape or form lacking sympathy or just perceived as being overly aggressive. So I would say more than anything else that narrative really has been just like robbing us of our ability to truly understand that that perception was born out of tragedy. The fact that you had like this desperate outcome where two people who happen to be white and black get separate amounts of resources. And one, for instance, is placed in a purposely designed system that robs that person of resources and prevents them from actually having successful outcomes, specifically if they have like a felony or a misdemeanor charge. And just like the appearance of being in jail all by itself can show off a person's ability to have success. And one individual doesn't necessarily have to face the same challenges that individual does. So, for instance, one thing I can point to as an example is a black person that lives in a perceived ghetto and a white person that lives in a frat house, a white guy that lives in abundance of luxury. That individual, both of those individuals are going to do the supposedly similar things because they're kids, right? They're going to, like, smoke marijuana and stuff like that. But one person gets charged for 5 years on a mandatory minimum, and they get their lives completely destroyed because no person in this country will hire a person, or there are very few corporations that will hire people who have like criminal records, and the other person can basically not have to worry about a criminal record whatsoever. So those disparate stories all by itself show the fact that our criminal justice system and our country really needs to take a second look at those kind of responses. And that really boils back down to the whole concept of the angry black man, where you have people not necessarily being aware of these systems playing into their perspective. So, for instance, you see on the news black men being plastered all over as being thugs, and you don't necessarily hear a hint of white people or people who happen to not fit a narrative being expressed that way. So you have those subtle terms that are used to describe black people, and that's what people work off of, unfortunately, because that's what's been beat into their head ever since they were kids.
Right. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you just like when you at the protest, listen to you, very well spoken. And it's one of the things I just love about you. But what should I have asked you that I didn't know enough to ask? What is it that you can tell me? Maybe I just don't know enough about you to ask.
Well, I would say that this experience, or should I say this interest in knowledge that I've accumulated, didn't necessarily happen overnight. It was through years of experiences where I was reminded of who I was as a black man. And growing up in Ann Arbor, you are taught this like philosophy of perceiving this area as being like super progressive. Mm-hmm. Everybody is on the same page about racial equity and whatnot, but really there are opportunities for us to improve on, just like any other community. And it comes down to really just like the experiences that you have in like schools, and the fact that when you go through a certain portion of time in your life, you perceive yourself as being equal to one person, but you don't necessarily realize the fact that the color of your skin can dictate the outcomes that you have. So you have to work 10,000 times harder in order to be considered half as worthy. So really what happened was that I am one in 1,000 kids who get these kinds of opportunities where I was able to go to school. And really what I want to do more than anything else is open up the doors for other people that are like me and make sure that they get the same success I did. Because, to tell you the truth, it's a luck of the draw in the fact that I got to Michigan State University and I was able to be double major and just be in general somewhat successful. I think that in of itself is wrong. And I really think to myself, there is a lot of things we need to work on in this country, and specifically in this community, to really fight towards the goal of racial equity and ensuring that we can provide people the same opportunities that others don't often have. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it makes sense. Make a lot of sense. You know, in our closing, I have two things. First of all, you're definitely going to be successful. Um, you know, just keep doing what you're doing, keep speaking positivity. You know, as you know, God bless those who does, you know what I mean, that speak peace, speak life, that's not negative. And that's one of the reasons that I have you on. So most definitely, man, you're definitely going to be successful. There's no reason for you not to be successful. Very well spoken, very well articulate. Um, and I just thank you for what you do as far as an activist, creating positive change, being the change that you want to see, right?
Right.
The second thing is I almost hit the off button when I saw that state flag in the back.
Yeah, what can I say? I mean, I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, right? I mean, I gotta change up the scenario a little bit. Like, you know, I mean,
Hey, you already know I was gonna say something about it. I kept looking at it. I'm like, is that a state flag in the back?
well, I mean, I am considering this place for law school, so I mean, I'm gonna try to change it up a little bit. Of course, might have a couple of friends that might have quite a few problems with that, you know.
But as far as we're ending the show, I just want you to give you this opportunity, man, to just say and whatever you want to say, whatever points you want to get across. This is the time that you can most definitely do that, sir.
So one thing I want to do is, before I go off, I want to address some of the young people who are watching this show explicitly. I just want to say to you guys that all of you, the energy I'm seeing from all of the like Generation Zers, I'm a, I guess, late age millennial who really was inspired by them. And what I saw in my campaign with Eli was inspiring, to say the least. And really, if any of you are considering not participating in this upcoming election, I have to just tell you, please, like, reconsider, because what we have now in this country, our circumstances are extremely dire. And when it comes down to like civil rights legislation that has ensured our ability to vote and our ability to do everything we aspire towards, and the fact that we have a crisis like climate change and a number of progressive changes that have ensured people the opportunity to marry even if they happen to be the same gender. And I think about all these accomplishments that we've made. It lies upon us the incentive to ensure that this future lives up to the principles that we often talk about in our social circles, people who are progressive. Mm-hmm. It lies on us now to push for those changes and to go out and vote. So I'm just urging everybody that's young, who's watching now, those kids that are turning 18 in this fall election, please just go out and vote and work on the polls, even just do whatever you can to contribute to positivity and ensuring that we can build upon what we've done in past generations.
All right. And that was Edward Dance, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
All right. Thank you. Pleasure.
Hey, no problem. Hey, stick out backstage, and then I get right with you right afterwards.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. No problem. All right. That was Edward Dance. I had been waiting for this opportunity to talk to him. Like I said, just a very positive person. I love positive people that want to make positive change, right? And have an intellectual conversation, not just screaming, but just can do it in a way as fluid as I saw this young man do it. Now, my people was telling me I put up some flyers on a couple of the shows that's coming up. I'm going to redo it because those 2 flyers did not show. So I'm gonna do that before we end the show. On the 24th, we have Denise. She's an admin of Breathe. She will be doing the self-care, kind of like a boundaries things, when to know your boundaries, but she know more about it than I know. She'll be doing this particular ministry through Breathe. And we will also, once it's done through Breathe, I'm gonna record it and all